What is up, everybody, and welcome to the FanDuel Strategy Show for Friday. As always on Fridays. Joined today by Mr. Total, and we're going to talk you through just a few strategies for tonight. It's really early in the day, so we don't have lineups or anything like that. Projections aren't dialed in right now. Ownership numbers are up, but obviously they'll get more accurate closer to game time. So we're just going to talk a little bit of strategy just on FanDuel. Focus just on FanDuel, and should be fun. As always on a Friday slate, there's a lot of games. So let me bring in Tuttle, though. Let me talk to Tuttle first. Tuttle, how's it going, man?
It's going well. You mentioned ownership projections. That's what I've been tasked to do this baseball season. And you explained it right. Yeah, like this first run of ownership is purely automated. I haven't had a chance to kind of get in there and tweak things how I think they're gonna kind of unfold. But the automated ownership is typically a pretty good overview. And if you sort by that on this slate on FanDuel, you see some pretty clear. Like it's pretty clear what the chalk's going to be, right? When you have Atlanta and Coors, when you have Garrett Cole uh, scoring off against the Tigers, like we can be pretty confident where we know where the chalk's going to be, and it's kind of just trying to figure out how to navigate that chalk. If it's good chalk, if we can play it, or if we should just try to differentiate our lineups.
Yeah. So, yeah, good point. So that's a good segue there in the ownership. So the first run that we're looking at right now at 11:30 Central Time, you say this is automated. This is just what the system says is a
Yep.
baseline number kind of thing. And then what happens after that?
Yeah. So Jamino's he set up the system where it's all automated. Basically, it's automated on a stretch of runs. Like if you were to run this many lineups, this is likely how many times Garrett Cole would be in the lineup, which I'm showing 26% right now, is what we have at this point in time. And then I'll just do a little bit um, deeper dive because this is purely based on our projections, plate IQ projections. There are lots of projection systems throughout the industry. The BAT, which is hosted on Rotogrinders, is one of those that influences ownership. There are other sites that influence ownership. There's recent trends that influence ownership. So, like last week on Friday, Shane Bieber was pitching again, and he's kind of been not great. Velo's been down a little bit. So he was popping his chalk. He's a guy that can sometimes get edited down or up based on certain things. FanDuel is, the one starting pitching site. So typically we do see a distribution like we're kind of seeing here today, where one guy does pop his chalk, and then after that, you really don't have to worry all that much. And I do think that's kind of be the case here today as well, where you'll see Garrett Cole pop in the 25 to 40% range. And then after that, we actually do have some pretty strong pitchers. So I'll be interested to see where I eventually settle in on like somebody like Corbin Burns is kind of popping out to me at first glance at 6%. And I do think he's probably going to go under owned on this slate. People see San Diego, they see it as a tough matchup. They're bad. Their lineup's not that great right now, they've got some strikeouts in that lineup too. If they keep Luke Voigt in there and things like that. So Burns is the guy that stands out to me is the guy that I would be excited to play over Cole or as a pivot off of Cole. But yeah, after Cole, I think you can just pretty much do whatever you want because all these guys are going to be low enough to own where you don't really have to worry too much about it.
So I'm gonna go back to the ownership real quick. So like if I were to look at the bat this year, I would think Dalton Varsho is the best
Yep.
ever. Like in
Right.
years past, that was Odor. Like you just couldn't shake
Yep.
the Odor. So it's your job then later on in the day. You're gonna go in there and say, "Whoa, we always give this guy that's a little too high on this guy. Let's manually lower that on that ownership on this guy, right?"
Right. And that's not exclusive to the bat either. Like
Yeah,
different
yeah. Just
projection
that's what
systems.
they do.
Yeah, they typically have blind
They play
spots at certain
favorites.
points.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they have guys that pop for certain reasons. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned the bat, so I'll continue on. Like we've had slates this year where like it would look like Chris Flexen's going to be chalk. That guy's not going to ever be chalk, right? The guy doesn't get strikeouts. People do not want to play him. And so different instances like that where our initial run or our initial run might have trouble deciphering, younger guys, younger arms. Perhaps we don't have their pitch count in the projections updated properly yet. Things like that. or perhaps it's just not accounting for if this young arm's supposed to actually be good, or if they're just much more mediocre. So the younger guys are really tough to figure out. But again, a lot of it too is like what's people going to do? What are people going to do is the other, and that's the tough one to quantify, right? Because if they're using your projections, your ownership projections, theoretically, if they're using them correctly, then some of these guys that you're projecting as higher owned, their ownership's going to get influenced, right? Because if you're projecting offense A to be extreme chalk, a lot of people are using that as a decision point to then say, hey, if they're chalk, I want to fade that chalk. Or vice versa, we'll see, teams that might not project for a ton of ownership end up creeping up because they're the team that everybody pivots to. So it's definitely kind of, it's hard to get exact, but directionally accurate is definitely possible.
So I think it's just a good point. We're talking strategy, and I think people take the ownership projections a little too literally sometimes, and you can make your own tweaks in there, man. It's a baseline.
Yeah,
just a baseline. Make your own tweaks if you see something that looks off. By all means, exploit it yourself in your own lineups. That's a good thing to do. But
especially with hitters, because
yeah.
There's so many hitters on a slate, right? And hitter ownership is typically based on stacks. So if a stack's going to be owned, that hitter's going to be owned. If a stack's not going to be owned, that hitter's not going to be owned. Is basically what baseball has turned into. It's completely different from NBA, where the good plays are going to be owned no matter what, and so the projected ownership can be a lot more constant. Whereas in baseball, it's baseball. It's based on big events. It's based on a guy getting on base 1 out of 4 times. Like the 250, 300 batting average is good these days. So the ownership fluctuates a lot more because people like good chalk. Yeah, they're a good play, but they still fail a tremendous amount. So people are much more willing to pivot off of that chalk than in a sport like NBA.
Yeah, I agree. So let's think about FanDuel here. 12-game slate tonight, Friday night. I just throwing the players, the teams, the matchups, everything out the window for a second. Like I have my own process. When I judge MLB, I'll flip through my phone here for like on a Sunday night to see what the upcoming schedule looks like on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I can look and go on a Monday, okay, that's 6-game main slate. On Tuesday, flip it. Oh, that's only a 5-game main slate. Oh, Wednesday, there's a 12. Like every bit of strategy, without even looking at players or match, is always judged for me on the size of the slate. Like when it's a 12-gamer, 13-game, it's totally different than a 4-gamer. It's just totally, then no matter who's pitching, playing, or where they're playing, it's just different. So, you look at it, 12 games on a Friday night. Is there anything that jumps out to you, like when you know it's going to be a 12 or 13 gamer? Like for me, like this has got to be stacks, heavy stacks, double stacks. You just got to stack up on this. I can get by with not stacking on my 4-game or my 5-game, or I can figure out how to manipulate it to where it's not as heavy. But on a 12 or 13 gamer, I got to have all stacks, and there probably got to be a lot of double stacks in there too. So is the size of the slate do anything for you?
Yeah, completely agree with that. I mean, you're to ship it on a 12-game slate is significantly different than shipping it on a 3 or 4-game slate for sure. All stacks, you're looking for the outliers essentially. I will say though, like if you do expect to see ownership condensed on a 12-game slate, like I think we're probably going to see a little bit tonight, then you can treat it a little bit more like smaller slates, like right. If you see, but we have more options now. So again, going back to the Garrett Cole point, where we think he's going to be chalk, we think he's probably going to be around that 30% range, which is pretty high, especially for a 12-game slate. So even just making the decision point around there. So like a smaller slate, if you saw he was going to be in the 50-60% range, you might pivot off of him just for the leverage in GPPs, but might not have very many strong alternative options. Whereas tonight's slate, we can pivot off them, and we actually have some really good alternative options with high upside.
Yeah, it's a good point. So let's just briefly, real quickly, let's go through some factors you might factor into your lineups tonight. Weather, Weather doesn't look bad, what was it? Not last night, the night before last. Boy, listening to Roth, and he came on about 5 minutes before the Yankees game and said, "I don't like it," and it hadn't rained out yet. And I was like, "Well, if Roth doesn't like it, let's just get everybody out of there because it doesn't look like it's going to play." And sure enough, about 10 minutes after lock, it got rained out. So, you got a little edge there if you listen to Roth. There's a lot of dead money in there with the Yankees that night. So tonight, though, looks clean, man. Nothing there. I like to go to Weather Edge and see if there's anything like massive that jumps out, because sometimes I know projections account for a lot of this stuff, but it's always good to see a big red number or a big green number there to maybe get you into a different territory than other people. Tonight I don't see it. Everything just looks okay, blends in, nothing massive. So I ain't gonna mess around with that. Let's go to some pictures now and talk about that chalk you said. Looking at some of these guys, Garrett Cole, big number. And then after that, there's a little bit of a tier below him of All-Day McClanahan. Good pitchers. And then I like that Corbin Burns call. What do we expect here for tonight? What do you do on a night like tonight when you're looking at one pitcher that's really kind of head and shoulders above everybody, but he's going to garner the ownership, and you can only roster one pitcher on FanDuel? What do you do with a guy like Cole?
Yeah, anecdotally, he's been bad as chalk too. Again, that's complete anecdote, but he really has. So yeah, I mean, I do sort by projections, kind of get a closer look at it, and you're looking. It's a pretty big gap between Cole and some of these others. But I mentioned Burns. Like, it doesn't matter a whole lot who he faces, right? Like, he still has the same upside as Garrett Cole. Completely fine taking that ownership discount. I'm more apt to. I will say it's a bigger slate. So, like, if you want to play Cole, it's whatever, because there's plenty of different ways to differentiate those Cole lineups on a slate like tonight. So if you want to eat the Cole chalk, like, do it. Completely fine grabbing exposure to him. If you want to match the field on 30% of your Cole lineups be Cole, completely okay with that. But there are good options. There's Corbin Burns. McClanahan's been really good. So a lot of the reason why we're seeing some of this automated ownership coming extremely low on some of these guys too is because they're really pricey. They're the same price as Garrett Cole. So, like, Joe Musgrove would be another one of those guys who his projected ownership is currently showing under 1%. But he'll get higher owned than that. But he's 10-9. People are not going to pay up for him over Garrett Cole on a slate like today. So you'll get him pretty easily around that 5% range. So I think he's a very good tournament option as well. Or the other thing you can do is, if you're looking to just completely flip your builds, you're going to go look for, maybe a lower price pitcher. I will say I'm not in love with any of the cheap options on today's slate. James Kaprielian would be probably the one. He has not been good the last couple outings. He has not had a long leash the last couple of outings. But he's 6,200. So if you're looking to flip the build, you're looking to basically get it done with the bats, right? It's a little bit different of an approach, as where if you're trying to pivot off of Cole with a guy in a similar price point like Corbin Burns or Joe Musgrove, you're going to need those guys to just completely outscore Cole. Otherwise, it's not going to get it done. So if you're not comfortable fading Cole with the higher priced arms because you just think Cole's better than those options, the other alternative, again, just go cheap at pitcher. But it's not great. It's Kaprielian, maybe Kikuchi. We've seen Buxton in and out of the lineup over the last week, and their lineup is really weak against lefties when Buxton's not in there. So, like, maybe he gets another day off or something like that happens, and then Kikuchi would maybe pop as a little bit better of an option. But yeah, there's plenty of ways to go. All of that to say that Cole is pretty clearly the top overall option, and fading him is not the most comfortable thing to do in the world. But hey, it's baseball.
Yeah. I like to, when I see a slate like this with these pitchers like this, and I don't necessarily, like you've been saying, I don't look at the names per se and the numbers. I just look at the breakdown. Who's good, who's average, who's bad. I look at these guys. You tier them up. I see plenty of guys in a particular, like Cole's in a tier, not by himself though. These are Burns and McClanahan are in the same tier as him. So, and then there's a tier right below. So there's lots of options. So on a night like tonight, I am a spread it out guy. I hate to be a dean about things and put 10% on everybody, but I will be underweight on Cole, just for the record, and overweight on the other guys. Just naturally, I'll spread it out a little bit, but that's just the way that the way it breaks down on that kind of a slate. If it was Cole and a bunch of scrubs, it'd be different. Then I may be thinking about going way overweight on Cole. But like last night, who was last night? Main slate, nighttime. One guy stood out above everybody. I don't even remember who it was.
Sean Mania was last night.
Yeah, I went like overweight on the one guy who's really good, and
then Liberator, the new lefty who was trash for the Cardinals, was the second chalk.
I heard a lot of tilting on him in the chat, so glad I didn't touch that one. But tonight, yeah, it's a more spread it out night. So what I want to talk about next, before we're going to be much longer here, but I want to talk about Atlanta. This is one of those games. So you have you have it every once in a while in MLB where an opposing team goes into Colorado and they're just in such a good spot. It's a great ballpark. Tonight, they get to take on DC's boy, Chad Kuhl. Like, things are shaping up good for
Atlanta. Hard to pass up, dude.
They put up 13 last night. Like, if they're going to be chalky, we know that. They deserve to be chalky. They're really good. What do we do with these guys on a night like just Atlanta? Just speaking about Atlanta, what do we do with them on a night like when you got so many options? But man, it's hard to see them not doing something tonight.
So we kind of see it with the automated ownership too, that it's 12-game slate. So yes, Atlanta is awesome, but they're not going to come in nearly as high owned as last night on a smaller slate. I will say some of the stuff we have in place for projected ownership, we do have caps in place, like on a 12-game slate, because ownership does tend to spread out a lot more on a 12-game slate. So we don't want any guy popping too hard. I think we probably put a cap around 30% on a 12-game slate. So like seeing Ronald Acuna come in higher would not be surprising at all, even if people just use them as a one-off. Atlanta chalk, I'll have some exposure to them. It's so hard not to. But if you're eating that chalk, I do think there are different ways you could, try to navigate around it. So on FanDuel, people don't play the catcher a whole lot. Travis d'Arnaud hit two home runs last night. He could be a guy that you try to get a little bit more ownership to. The other guys, they don't really play bottom of the order guys a whole lot. Michael Harris had a good game last night. So if you want to maybe focus on your bottom of the order stacks or wraparound stacks, things like that might help you get a little bit different. Or if you want to take the approach of, a 4-man normal Atlanta stack, I would do that. But if I'm doing that, I'm being cautious of the secondary stack that I use with them. It's going to be a low-owned secondary stack, or a low-owned pitcher. It's got to be. You can't eat chalk in all three spots, basically, is what I'm trying to say. You can't do two chalky stacks and a chalky pitcher. It's going to be so hard to win if you run something like that out. So you just got to be cognizant of, you can eat chalk at two of the places, so you can eat chalk at a primary stack, maybe some chalk with some of the one-off hitters, but then you're going to have to get pretty weird at pitcher, or you get weird at the secondary stack. It's just kind of your preference, I guess, on things.
Yeah, I've always said that. I agree with that so much, man, that I can eat some chalk. I just got to be different in a couple spots along the way somewhere in my roster. I can eat some chalk, though. Chalk is chalk for a reason these days. It's because projections have just been taken up a notch. They're really good, and good plays are going to hit a lot of the time. So I'm okay with that. So that's going to be the big dilemma tonight for people: is Atlanta at Colorado. The course field effect and the high ownership, is it worth it or not? We'll get into that closer to game time on some of the shows later on. But for now, I just want to get out of here and talk about some stacks other than Atlanta that may not grab the ownership that we can pivot to if we wanted to. Do you see anybody? Give me a couple of your favorite ones before we get out of here, and who you think those stacks are that can compete with Atlanta tonight for much less ownership.
Yeah, so not much less. You'll see New York, I think, pretty highly owned as well. If we're trying to get, I think probably in order, you're looking at Atlanta, New York, and then Toronto. People want to take bats against Chichi Gonzalez, who I did not even know was still in the league until I saw the probable pitchers this morning. I think outside of those three, you're probably going to be not too shabby in terms of projected ownership. So like a team that stands out is having power that's not going to be owned. Philadelphia against Chase Stilseth, who's looked good, but like his minor league numbers weren't that eye popping or anything like that. Like he at best looked like a mediocre end of the rotation type of pitcher. So Philadelphia, I think you could get some decent ownership on some of their bats, and they have plenty of power. One other one that I'll throw out there, if I can find it, the Mets as well, who've obviously been hitting. We'll have to see if Francisco Lindor's in the lineup after slamming his finger in a hotel room door.
Those hurt, man. I've done that before.
Because he does influence things. But so yeah, I mean, like Phillies, Mets, that type of thing. You're still looking at teams that have some power, but just aren't going to have a ton of ownership.
Yeah, the Yankees. You mentioned them. The Yankees could be a team. Like if we're going to get a lot of extra ownership on Atlanta, everybody's going to benefit from lower ownership than after that, and the Yankees might be one. Whereas if you took Coors Field off of this slate, who would be the highest owned? The Yankees might be the highest owned stack, but they're going to be way under owned now because of Coors Field. Toronto, you said Chi. And then I'm with you. Like we got Colorado in Colorado, but I kind of tend to lean towards maybe a better performance out of Max Fried than the Colorado offense. So I'm okay with not playing a whole lot of Colorado. And then the rest of these guys, there's not that, I don't really want to attack Chris Bassett or Jose Urquidy or Logan Gilbert, Merrill. These are good pitchers. So yeah, this might be like a really concentrated at the top stack night for me from just my initial glance here. So Total, man, I think we walked through it. I think that's pretty much all we can do for right now. Gave a few stacks, talked about some ownership, lots of good stuff going on here. Any final thoughts before we jump out of here on this strategy video?
No, not too much. Just remember, if you're eating chalk in a couple of different places, make sure you look to get different elsewhere, whether that's a bottom of the order stack, kind of getting weird at pitcher, or a little bit weirder with your secondary stacks.
Yeah, guys, we appreciate you tuning into this show. Be on the lookout for all the videos on a Friday, and then we will culminate everything with a little Grinders live tonight. I'll be on that one with Dean and Kirky. Remember, there's a big announcement tonight. It's not an announcement. It's just I got to reveal what happened this week, okay? It's a big reveal for me. I've been holding it in all week. Kirk. It is, man. Me, Kirk, and Dean. And then that'll lead right into crunch time with the boys. So, fun night, Friday, man. Let's get it. We appreciate you tuning in. Good luck in those GPPs. We'll be back next week. But for now, we're out of here.